Hey, it's good to see you. Wow. Yeah. Our pastor, I don't always say why, when one of the staff members is not here. We don't always say. They have private lives too. But our pastor and his wife are at the hospital right now having a baby. Yes. Yes. Well, actually, Sarah's having the baby. Pastor is there. He sent me a text. He said, "Hey, it looks like it's time. Could you preach?" I said, "No, but I'll go to the hospital with Sarah and you preach." I didn't want to do that. So here I am. I'm excited. That's just going to be great. And we can't, this is the church baby, and it's kind of all of us feel like this is ours. So they have two, if you're new here, two beautiful little girls already and expecting the third little girl. So I have no idea what that means. Doris and I had boys, and our boys had boys. We don't know how to do girls in our family. We just do boys. So I'm a little jealous of Pastor, and that's exciting. That's neat. So pray for them. Pray for Sarah. We'll let you know. You know how sometimes when there's a ball game, an important ball game going on. The Vols are playing. Well, they wouldn't be playing on Sunday, but an important ball game going on, and there's a service, and we'll say, okay, we'll keep track of the score. We'll let you know when something happens. Well, we're going to do that. If somebody gets a text that the baby has come, you just shout it out. We'll take a moment. We'll celebrate. And now, don't just be making stuff up. That'd be a mess. But we'll have a little celebration, and then we'll go on. Okay. Wow, it's good to see you. It's been an interesting week. Lots of fun, exciting, busy, traumatic things have happened. And that's just in Doris's life. I don't know what's been going on with you all, but it's been a good week. Doris, let me tell you a story about Doris. Pastor does memes. I don't do memes. Memes are... Okay, let me just, here's a moment of honest confession. One time, Pastor came to me and he said, "Look," said, I got a text that somebody doesn't like the memes. Now, if that was you, that's okay. You have a right to text us, but that was dumb. Anyway, so somebody doesn't like the memes. Should I not do memes? I said, "Pastor, old preachers like me and Brother Carlton, we've been telling really dumb jokes for years to start the service, and this is just a young man's dumb jokes. That's just what you do." And yes, that's you, that's your person. So I'm excited that he does that, and he's put his personality on that. So all that to say, here's a dumb joke. It's not a dumb joke, but a dumb story. Well, it's not a dumb story. It's about my wife. So I'm in so much trouble right now. I have no idea I don't know where to go with this. Doris is a laugher. She's a laugher. She gets tickled, as we say in the South, and she just starts laughing, and she can't control it. One Sunday, we went to see a friend of mine, Ed Irwin, his wife Kathy. Ed was an evangelist, and we went to see them in doing a revival. And that afternoon, we were eating together, and he said, "Hey, why don't we all sing? Why don't the four of us sing together tonight? Let's sing together." Some people ask me to sing, Delilah. Not many, but some people. So we practiced a song. Came time for the service, and right before we walk up, he got this bright idea. He said, "Let's sing it a cappella." Now, we hadn't practiced a cappella. Let's sing it a cappella. No piano. So we start up. He plays a chord on the piano, and then he starts talking. And he talked for 20 minutes. Well, by the time he got talking, I had no idea what key this song was in. We started singing in 4 different keys. I mean, it was awful. And about 3 notes into this, Doris put her head down on the pulpit, and her shoulders are shaking, convulsing. She is laughing so hard at this. She's just laughing and laughing. Now, Kathy, Ed's wife, didn't know Doris very well. She thought Doris was really being blessed. She thought she was going, And so she would just say, she'd pat her on the back and she'd say, bless her, Lord, bless her. And Doris would just shake more and more and more. And then she just blessed her. And in all fairness, when we got done, she looked up. She was crying. Tears are running down her face. There was mascara and everything. Sometimes the crying and the laughing, the sorrow and the joy, sometimes it all gets intermingled. And it's hard to tell what's what. And do you notice that? I'm in my reading through the Bible this year. I'm reading in Ezra, just finishing up Ezra. And early in Ezra is the story of the rebuilding of the temple. The children of Israel have been in the Babylonian captivity, but Artaxerxes has allowed some of them to go back, and Nehemiah rebuilds the wall. Ezra rebuilds the temple. And when it comes time to dedicate the temple, there's this such an interesting story. People are rejoicing, and the shouts of the rejoicing are so loud that the people in the countryside around them can hear it. But, he says, but some of the people are weeping over the great loss and the way the temple used to be, and now it's not anymore. And he says, and the sounds of the sorrow and the sounds of the rejoicing were intermingled so that the people on the outside couldn't tell the difference. Have you ever noticed that sometimes we can be in a service and some of us are raising our hands and praising God and worshiping, and others are raising our hands and weeping over the difficult thing that they're going through and the hardship and the. Have you noticed that? One of my favorite American poets is Carl Sandburg. He just wrote neat little ditties. He wrote a little limerick. I guess he was looking at a sign in front of a school one day, and he wrote this little limerick: "Cross children walk." You know that crosswalk sign. Cross children walk, happy children ride. I think that has nothing. That was a lot funnier to me than to you all, apparently. But here's one that he wrote. The fog comes on little cat's feet and sets looking over the city on silent haunches and then moves on. The fog slips in, unexpected, unannounced, and sits there for a while, and then it moves on. And there are some times in the midst of all of the rejoicing and the celebration and what God is doing, that this fog will come over me or you or us, and this heaviness, and I don't even know where it came, and it just and everybody. I'm not trying to take away from what is happening, but I just feel this dreary, drudgery, despair, despondent depression. Do you feel that? Last Sunday, we began 21 days of prayer and fasting. Our pastor preached a great message on prayer and how important it is. And we are celebrating together what God is doing. We're excited as a congregation. We're praying and fasting, and we're believing that that Jesus has come that we might have life and have it more abundantly. And we're rejoicing in all of that. And yet, my imagination is that even in the midst of that, for some of us, there's this fog. There's this heaviness. And we're trying to figure out how to pray through the fog. It comes sometimes in response to the prayer. If history proves itself to be true, my guess is that some of you began the prayer and fasting last week, and about Tuesday, your life had just gone to hell in a handbasket. I mean, it had become hard and difficult, and stuff is happening, and bad news. And what is that about? Sunday, I'm celebrating, and by Tuesday or Wednesday, I think, oh, God, how long will it be like this? Carl Sandburg's not the only poet that ever wrote that kind of fog limerick. In Psalm chapter 69, the poet David, remember David? The king, the shepherd boy becomes king, greatest king over Israel. God blessed him. Israel became the greatest nation in the world at that time. So many wonderful things. All of that. And yet sometimes the fog just came in on David. In the midst of celebrating, he'll write one psalm that is such this celebratory, praising God. And the very next psalm, well, look at Psalm 69, the first couple of verses. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there is no standing. I've come into deep waters where the floods overflow me. I'm weary with my crying. My throat is dry. My eyes fail, looking for God. Now, I don't believe that this is for all of you. I don't believe that everybody in here came in so depressed that you just can't lift your head off the pillow. You might be by the time the sermon's over, but I don't think that's the case. But I do believe that some are, and I do believe that all have been or will be, that at some point, if you live long enough, you will experience the fog. You will know what it's like for those things to just come in and overwhelm you. There are reasons for that. We have outward obstacles. Stuff just happens, you know. We get a doctor's report that is not good. We get laid off from our job. We go through times of separation. Our son moves their grandkids to Atlanta. I just kind of working that in case Jacob was listening to the sermon. I want him to hear what that's all about. These outward things happen to us, and as hard as we try, it just brings on the fog. Or there are personal problems, friends, family, finances, marriage, these personal things that sometimes no one else knows about. But we carry and we come to church on Sunday morning and we look good and we put on a smile and we say, yeah, we're good, we're fine. But there's these personal problems that we are dealing with that are accompanied by the fog. Or sometimes there are inner issues, anxiety, obsessive compulsive thinking, depression, despair. These things, this inner stuff that my father was bipolar. My father was funny and bright, and he could, I always say, he could preach like a bishop and sing like Pavarotti. He was amazing when he was amazing. But when the fog came, the inner stuff, it didn't have to be about, the church could be doing well, the kids could be great. Of course his kids were great. But the inner stuff sometimes creates the fog, brings that. So what do? How do you pray? When pastor says, we're going to have 21 days of prayer, it's going to be great, it's going to be exciting, I can't wait. And something in you says, oh man, I can barely put one foot in front of the other. Well, there's a story, an Old Testament story, that is probably as typical of this kind of experience as one we could find. It's a familiar story. It's one that you have read before, but I want to share it with you again, and let's talk about that. 1 Kings chapter 19. 1 Kings chapter 19, and it's this little vignette in the life of the amazing, incredible prophet Elijah. And a powerful man of God, did unbelievable, miraculous things, was responsible for over and over again turning the nation of Israel back to God. And yet this little vignette is almost shocking in how it surprises us. 1 Kings chapter 19, we're going to look down through that. Let me start with just the first couple of verses. And Ahab, who was the king at that time, told Jezebel, his wife, all that Elijah had done. Also how he had executed all the prophets with the sword. Then Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah saying, so let the gods do to me and more also, if I do not make your life as the life of one of them by tomorrow about this time. Well, now, what's that all about? Let me remind you of the backstory. Ahab is a wicked king. He is leading the nation of Israel away from God. He has married a woman named Jezebel. And the only person more wicked than Abraham in that kingdom is Jezebel. And she is leading Ahab away from God, and he's leading the nation away from God. So God says to Elijah, go confront them. I want you to go talk to them. I mean, just tell you, if God had said that to me, I say, what you talking about, Willis? You know, no, I'm not going. But not Elijah. He doesn't back down. He goes and confronts them. And in the midst of this trip, they're bragging on their Jezebel is leading them to worship the god of Baal. So they are bragging on their prophets Baal. So Elijah says, I tell you what let's do. Let's have a contest. We can have a free throw shooting contest, or we can do mud wrestling, or we can have a foot race. No, I tell you what let's do. Let's have a prayer contest. And so he invites him to the mountaintop, 400 prophets of Baal, Elijah. They build altars, and he says, we're going to pray, and the God that answers by fire, that will be the God. You go first. And so they build the 400 prophets, build an altar. They sacrifice an ox, and they pray, and Elijah's talking smack. I mean, he's saying, maybe he's asleep. You know, maybe you need to pray louder. You know, maybe he's on vacation. Pray and pray and pray. Nothing happens. They're praying to this false god, but nothing happens. So Elijah, little Elijah, 400 of them, little Elijah, he says, okay, let me do it. Oh, by the way, before we do this, you got any water? And he gets buckets of water and pours it on it. And then let's do it again. And he drenches the sacrifice. And then he prays a simple little, about a 40-word prayer. And God rains down fire and burns up the sacrifice. And so, in celebration, Elijah does what all great preachers do. He pulls out his sword and kills 400 prophets. This would be a great time to do an altar call. If you don't know God right now, it's amazing. It's an incredible story. It's just amazing. And so the word gets back to Ahab and Jezebel, which is certainly to be expected. And they're mad. They're angry. And Ahab tells Jezebel all about it. Jezebel says, let the Lord do it to me, if the way he did it to them, if I don't make your life like those. Now, if God had said for me to go talk to them, I'd have said, no, I'm afraid. I'm not doing that. But if God had said, if I had heard that story after this big moment, I'd have said, are you kidding me? I'm not afraid. Look what God just did. This is amazing. You ain't the boss of me. I'm not afraid. Look what God has done. And that's why it is so shocking what happens next in this story. Look at verse 3. And when he saw that, Jezebel speaking out against him, and when he saw that, Elijah, he arose and ran for his life and went to Beersheba, which belongs to Judah, and left his servant there. But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree, and he prayed that he might die. And he said, it is enough. Now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my fathers. Really? What happened? There's excitement and enthusiasm, and we started a 21-day of prayer and fasting, and everybody's raising their hands and clapping and praising God, and this is wonderful, and we're so. And the very next thing, he is so under the fog, he is so much in despair that he says, listen, I'd just rather die. I'd rather die. I can't. Has that ever happened to you? Have you ever had those kinds of moments where in the midst of the rejoicing and the prayer and the celebration, what happened instead was this fog? And it comes suddenly. It comes, it is, okay, let me make a confession that part of what prompted this message is I just had a picture I wanted to show you. So I'm going to write a whole sermon so I can show this one picture. Yesterday, some of you know, if you know Facebook, everybody knows everything now on Facebook. Yesterday, I decided I was going to go out and work on I built a tree house for my grandchildren 15 years ago, and I said, I'm going to go work on that. I'm going to clean it up. I'm going to change. So I pulled everything out. I cleaned it up. I'm so excited about this. Worked on the tree house all morning, hot, sweaty. But it's going to be great. It's going to be great. Came inside, little rainstorm came up, and everything that I had done in 5 hours of work, God decided to undo in about 30 seconds. That's my tree house. Well, actually, it's Caleb's tree house. Slide came off. Tree house is a big, huge tree. All of a sudden, I mean, out of nowhere, and some of you all probably experienced some things like that as well yesterday. Out of nowhere, the storm came up and destroyed everything. And there have been moments in my life where, I mean, I'm doing great. I'm going along. It's wonderful. And then wham, the storm comes up, and I'm under the fog. I'm in despair. I'm sitting under a broom bush, and I'm saying, Lord, I would rather be dead than alive. I can't take it anymore. Does that make sense? All right, that's all I got time for. Thank you all for being here. I got to get a better joke. I'm going to start showing memes instead of doing that. Sometimes we have good reason for the fog. Let's just say that sometimes there are things in our lives and we need to understand. And in fact, if we're aware of these, we can kind of anticipate a little bit. There is psychological letdown. Have you noticed that the fog comes a lot after Christmas, after New Year's, after a job promotion, after a special birthday, after a celebration, the fog comes? There's this psychological buildup. Our brain has been producing endorphins, epinephrine, dopamine, been producing that, and now it doesn't, and so there's this letdown. This is a great day. They're celebrating, beat 400, yes, and then when it's over, the adrenaline stops, the dopamine's washed away, and there's this psychological letdown, and the fog comes after that. Here's a little very personal note. Preachers call that Monday. Preachers, I can tell you from pastoring for 25 years, Monday is a hard day for lots of preachers. So I say that to say, pray extra for your pastor on Monday. Every Monday, just making a note. I'm going to pray for Pastor Bryce today because he's worked hard, he's presented a message, and there's this psychological letdown. There is physical fatigue. There's physical fatigue. We can just get tired. We worked 14 days straight, Robert, without a break. We've done all week, and then on weekends we've had church stuff, and we just going and going and going. Elijah's story. The chariots are going back to tell Ahab and Jezebel, and he outruns them. There's this long race. He just run a marathon. There's a physical fatigue, and when we get tired, we need to recognize that we are susceptible to the fog. Not be afraid of this, not be alarmed, not let it surprise us. There is heart heaviness. Sometimes there are just things that are so heavy. This is not please, I want you to feel sorry for me, but I used to be a counselor. I don't know what I do now. I don't know what I do. I'm still doing part-time at branches and part-time here. But part of what counseling does is you carry with you a heaviness, a lot of times. I know the stories, marriages that I'm so interested in, but they're struggling, or tragedy that families are facing. And so there's just heart heaviness. I think Elijah carried that heaviness of recognizing, oh man, how far have we come from following God, and look where we are. There's a heart heaviness. There's emotional exhaustion. We can just get emotionally, the ups and downs and ebbs and flows, we can just get emotionally. When we see those things, we are susceptible to the fog, and again, we should not be surprised at that. We should just know. And finally, there's real rejection. These are his people. These are the country, the nation that he has prophesied to for so long. They love, and now they're saying, we're going to kill you. And there's this genuine, real rejection. And how many of you know that nothing can knock us on our back more than being rejected by people that we love, by people that we care about? And so all these things have happened to Elijah. And the result is this pervasive, overwhelming fog. When we ought to be praising God and praying and celebrating, instead, there is just this fog. It's different levels at different times. Sometimes it's just kind of a nagging, I'm just not enjoying my walk with God like I used to. And sometimes it is so overwhelming that I can barely put one foot in front of the other. Have you ever experienced that? Have you ever you know that? So, what do you do about that? How do you work through that? Especially in a season of prayer, how do you pray? Well, let me just say quickly that sometimes we can be in it and not know. Sometimes you can be in the fog and just not know. Something just doesn't feel quite right. I know other people are celebrating, but I'm just not, Delilah's leading us in wonderful worship, and I don't know why. It doesn't feel. And if we examine ourselves, if we look closely, we might be in the fog. Look at verses 5 through 8. Then he lay down and slept. Usually what the fog does, we just want to sleep. He lay down and slept under the broom tree. Suddenly an angel touched him and said, "Arise and eat." And he looked, and there by his head was cake baked on coals and a jar of water. So he ate and drank, and he lay down again. The angel of the Lord came back a second time and touched him and said, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." So he rose and ate and drank, and he went in strength and the food for 40 days and 40 nights. This went on. He went as far as Horeb, the mountain of God. He's just doing this stuff. He's sleeping. He's eating. He's walking every day. He's just doing this stuff. But something in him is just, it's not breaking through. I submit that we live in a season of life where we carry a pervasive fog sometimes that we become acclimated to. We're not even aware of it anymore. There is such a high level of stress and just an ongoing chronic anxiety, and that most of us probably have a baseline that is far lower than our ancestors did because of this pervasiveness of the fog. We can be in it and not even know. What do you look for? How do you know? If something is going, and what do you look for? I started wearing glasses when I was in the 6th grade. Before that, I sat on the front row of the classroom, and I would pull my eye like that so I could see the board. And then I went to the optometrist, and I came walking out with glasses. I said, man, I had no idea. I thought everybody pulled their eye like that so they could see the board. And perhaps you carry around this fog, and you just think, this is just as good as it gets. This is just the way the world is. In this day and age, nobody's really happy. I know they say they are, but they're not. Nobody's really at peace. God doesn't really move in people's lives. I know they say that. That's not true, but when we're in the fog, it can feel that way, and we think that's the new normal. There is a pervasive fear. I'm constantly in fear of what the world holds, and the devil's going to get me, and what's going to happen to my children. There's a fear. This is a personal. I struggle with that, not for myself, and not even for my children, but for my grandchildren. I have to pray constantly against this fear that I can be in for my grandchildren. There's an overwhelming hopelessness. It's just it's not going to get any better. The church is not going to grow. We're not going to see revival. People aren't going to get. The world is getting worse and worse and worse. This overwhelming hopelessness. There is isolation when all that's taking place, and I just pull away. I don't want to be around people anymore. I don't want to be engaged. I don't want to be in church anymore. There is physical, spiritual, and emotional fatigue. I'm just exhausted. And finally, anhedonia. Anhedonia is just this loss of joy. I used to love to play tennis, and now I just don't anymore. I'm making that up, by the way. I still love to play tennis. But there is these things remind us that there is a fog. And everybody else is praying, but I feel the fog. Aren't you so depressed right now? Are you? I'm trying to talk you into the fog. Aren't you feeling it? Don't you just feel like, man, I'm just ready to, never mind. So, what do we do? Verses 9 and 10. And there he runs 40 days to Horeb, and there he went into a cave and spent the night in that place. Behold, the word of the Lord came to him and said to him, "What are you doing here, Elijah?" Let me just say to you, God can find you in the fog. You're not. God doesn't say, "Oh man, he was here and now he's not. I don't know where he was. He was here just a second ago." What happened? God knows exactly where you are. He's been there with you before. He'll be there with you again. And when you feel like I am so far away from God, he doesn't have a clue. It is just not true. God said, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" Elijah responds, "I have been very zealous for the Lord God of hosts, for the children of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, and killed your prophet with the sword. I alone am left. They seek to take my life." I'm the only one. Nobody else really. It's just me. Have you ever felt like that? When you feel like you're the only one, you ain't. Somebody has been there before. Somebody's done that before. So, what do we do? How do we get out? Let's get out of this thing, right? By looking at what to do. God always provides a path out. God always says, "I can get you out of this." And sometimes the 21 days of prayer, the celebration, the rejoicing, they are coming at just the right time, because it is through that God is going to bring us out of the fog. We're praying, we're celebrating, we're talking about how wonderful it is, and you're saying, "Oh man, not now. I wish we weren't doing this now. I just don't feel like it." And God's saying, "No, this is exactly when you need to do this. This is the time to pray through the fog." Verses 11 through 13, 1 Kings chapter 9. Then he said, "Go out," the angel said, "Go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord." And behold, the Lord passed by, and a great and strong wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord and tore down Mike's treehouse. But the Lord was not, it's in the Hebrew, trust me, it's in the Hebrew. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice. So it was when Elijah heard it that he wrapped his face in his mantle, went out and stood in the entrance of the cave. And suddenly a voice came to him and said, "Elijah, what are you doing here?" Here's what you do to pray your way through the fire. First of all, you get in the presence of God. You just get in the presence of God. Worship and worship music and reading your Bible and read. You just do whatever you have to do to get into the presence of God. I am so blue. I'm so depressed. I'm so despair. I don't want to do that. I know, but you just do it. You do the things that you do. In a season of my life where it seemed like it was always despair, I would listen to a song. Please don't anybody tell her that I said this. But I would listen to a song my sister sang on one of her albums. She sang, God loves you, and he wants you to know that he is with you. You are not alone. He will see you through. God loves you. And that was back in the cassette tape day, and I would hit rewind and play it again, and hit rewind and play it. You do whatever you have to do to get in the presence of God. And then here's the second thing you do. You wait out the storm. You just wait it out. And the wind blew, and the earthquake came, and storm after storm. And Elijah said, I'm going to be in the presence of God. I'm waiting out the storm. God's not in this. God's not in this. I'm just going to wait out the storm. Listen, it will stop. It will end. They're one of my favorite Bible verses. And it came to pass. It didn't come to stay. It came to pass. It will. So you wait. You just wait. Well, it's not getting any better. You just wait. You get in the presence of God. You wait and you listen for his voice. Most of the time, the storm distracts us. The earthquake gets our attention. The stuff that's going on, all that's all so I just wait and I listen closely for his. It usually takes me getting very, very quiet to hear his voice. What do you do when you're in the fog? You get in his presence. You wait out the storm. You listen to his voice. And then when it comes, this is such an interesting. And then when it comes, when you hear the voice, Moses takes his hoodie and he just pulls it up over his head and he just. You ever been in that place where finally God speaks to you and you just want to pull the blankets up and say, I'm going to stay right here. I don't want to move. I don't want to change anything. I'm just going to, just me and God. I'm just going to stay right here. You just stay close to that. When you hear God, you just stay close to that. Back when Doris and I were dating, before we were married, we still date, but before we were married dating, wow. This is before cell phones. Before cell phones. Can you believe that? Before email, before text. And so she lived in Gallatin. I lived in Ashton City, which wasn't that far away. But, all right. I don't have my phone. I'm looking on my watch. Somebody read it. Yay! Alexandra Kate Harper at 11:16. Well, she couldn't have waited 3 more minutes and let me finish this sermon. Yay. Isn't that great? That's exciting, isn't it? Doris would write me a note, mail it. We'd mail. We did mail. There's a thing called mail. I don't know if you young people, you put a stamp on it, it goes in the I'd keep that letter for weeks. I'd read it over and over and over again. Just read it, smell it, just right there, just stay in it. And when I have been in the fog and I hear the voice, I just stay right there. And I just hear it over and I read it. All I remember is the last thing God said to me. And I would listen, over and over and over again. Does that make sense? So how do you pray your way through the fog? Well, you get in his presence. You wait out the storm. You listen for his voice. And then you just close in on that. And you just stay until the fog finally leaves. Is that all right? Is that okay? What do we do after the fog? Real fast. Just some things in the life of Elijah. You force yourself to move. The angel kept saying to him, get up, move, get up, move. You force yourself. You put one foot in front of the other. You just move. When you feel like, oh, I'm in such despair, you just move. You focus on his goodness. The angel comes back and feeds him over and over again. You just focus on what God. You find a friend and fellowship. I'm all by myself. I'm all alone. He says, I got 7,000 prophets over here. You're not by yourself. You get in church. You get fellowship. You focus on other people. You quit being about yourself, and you just let yourself feel the love of God. Yeah, good. That is good. I learned a poem a long time ago when I was very young. Said, for I don't know where I go or when I'll go from this familiar scene, but Christ is here and Christ is there and all the way between. And though I go from all I know to some dim, vast unknown, though late I stay or soon I go, I shall not walk alone. Listen, if you are in the fog, God is there with you. And you just wait. You just wait. You stay in his presence and you wait until you hear his voice. And you can pray your way through this. He'll help you to do this. You just don't stay there. You just don't throw it. God, I'm going to focus on you, and we're going to get through this together. In this 21 days, my belief is that for some of you, this is about God praying you through the fog. Some of you, this 21 days came at exactly the right time because you're saying, man, you don't know what I'm going through. You don't know what my family is facing. And God's saying, oh, yeah, I do. And now's the time to pray through that. We're going to pray through that. Okay? John Michael was, so what I want to do in just a moment is give you a chance to do that. Give you a chance to pray your way through that. Before I do, I'll tell you a story. John Michael was my grandson. He was about 3, and he would go to the day school, the preschool at the Methodist church just up the road from where we live. And Jennifer would drop him off, and I would take him, and that was just a neat thing. And so one morning, it was a Monday, and apparently that weekend they had a youth activity or something, and they had drawn in chalk a huge cross in the driveway. And we're turning in, and John Michael, he said, Poppy, see, Jesus drew a big cross in the driveway. I said, yeah, he did, John Michael. Isn't that neat? And John Michael said, that crazy Jesus. And when the fog comes, and when out of nowhere the storm begins to blow and the depression settles in, or the despair or the darkness, when that happens, I just say, that crazy Jesus. He's got me through this before. He'll get me through this again. And you rehearse that over and over and over again. And God is going to do that for you right now today. You just say, that crazy Jesus, he can do this. He's going to do this. And we pray our way through the fog. So here's what I'd like to ask you to do. I'd like to ask you, if you are experiencing the fog, and we don't, listen, we all have felt this. This is not to point you out or isolate you from it. We've all felt this. But it does take moving. It does take doing something. If you are experiencing that fog and you need a particular breakthrough right now, I'd like to just ask you to just stand right where you are. Just stand up right where you are. I'm not going to ask you to come to the front. I'm not going to embarrass you anyway. Good. Thank you. Thank you. People are standing all over the place. Now, here's the only thing I'd like to ask you to do. If you are sitting close to someone like that, would you just reach out and just touch them very lightly? Just say to them, you're not in this by yourself. You're not in this. We're going to get through this. We're going to get in his presence, and we're going to wait out the storm. We're going to just make sure that there's somebody. I'm not going to stop until everybody has somebody to pray with them. We're going to get through this fog. We're going to get through this fog. Good. God's voice is not in the storm. His voice is not in the struggle. His voice is not in the calamity. His quiet voice is in you, just waiting for you to quiet enough to hear him. Father, in this moment, in this little respite, the eye of the storm, this little quiet space where the outside noise has kind of diminished for a moment. We want to hear your voice. We want to hear your quiet voice. We want to hear you say, we'll get through this. You'll be all right. We're going to overcome this. The fog will move on. Would you speak to the hearts, particularly of these men and women that have stood right now? And would you allow them to hear you say, in this instant, you're not destined for this. What are you doing here? I want to get you out of this today. I'm going to move you today. And for those of us who are fortunate enough to right this moment not be in the fog, would you remind us that when we do, and we will, that when we do go through the fog, you're there. You know where we are. You know how to find us. We love you. We praise you. And we know that you love us in the middle of our storms. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for this wonderful, precious new life that you have given to us this morning. May that be symbolic of the new life you're giving to all of us as we overcome the fog. In your wonderful, wonderful name we pray. Amen.